Victoria and Albert's relationship was really unusual, I think, for the Hanoverian dynasty. They were devoted to each other. It really does seem to have been a love match, very unusually.
Albert of Saxe-Coburg helped in life to make Britain great, but in death threatened Britain with disaster.
For her to lose somebody who was so particularly close to her as Prince Albert was, not only her precious toy boy, but at the same time her own personal advisor, her guide, her light, her mentor, was catastrophic to her, and nothing could replace him, and indeed nothing ever did.
When she lost Albert, depression would overwhelm the Queen and threaten to bring the country to the brink of revolution. Following months of unremitting work, Albert fell seriously ill. On the 7th of December 1861, his doctors diagnosed typhoid fever.
The prince is extremely ill and depressed, and the Queen becomes so nervous and so easily alarmed that the greatest caution is necessary. I must tell you confidentially that it requires no little management to prevent her from breaking down altogether.
After days of drifting in and out of a delirious fever, Albert died at 10 minutes to 11 on the evening of the 14th of December.
I took his dear left hand, which was already cold, and knelt down by him. All was over. I stood up and kissed his dear heavenly forehead, and called out in a bitter and agonizing cry, "Oh, my dear darling."
It was a black moment for Victoria, and the beginnings of a 20-year national crisis. All over Europe, monarchies were being forced out of existence. At a time when Britain desperately needed its queen to be popular and strong, she began to withdraw into herself.
From modern times, it looks as if the 19th century monarchy is incredibly stable. It's actually not. The French keep declaring republics, there are revolutions in other parts of Europe, and monarchies are trying to destroy each other. So it's a tough time. And therefore, when Victoria seems to step off the throne, it's a particularly bad moment at which to cease being an effective queen.
The average length of a Victorian widow's public mourning was a matter of months. But the Queen's mourning was to last for the remaining 40 years of her life and reign.
Truly, the prince was my entire self, my very life and soul. I only lived through him, my heavenly angel. Surely there can never have been such a union, such trust and understanding between two people. I try to feel and think that I am living on with him, and that his pure and perfect spirit is leading and inspiring me.
Victoria often spoke of Albert as though he were present in the room, and would even consult him before signing official documents. It was not long before there were genuine fears in the royal household for the Queen's mental state.
The royal household began to really, I think, fear for the Queen's sanity. It was a subject she herself had brought up. She had confided in ministers like Lord Clarendon that she felt perhaps she was losing her mind. George III, remember, had only died in 1820, not very long ago at all, within many people's living memory. And it was a subject that hovered over Victoria, if you like. She suffered from immense depressions after each of her children was born, which is rather ironic given how many children she had. And gradually, more and more spectators began to believe that she was indeed slipping into insanity.
Engulfed by grief for her beloved husband, and lacking anyone with the status or courage to shake her back to reality, the Queen's behaviour freewheeled from eccentricity towards obsession.
To continue going around looking very much like a bombazine muffin, poor little thing, tiny as she was something that was considered rather eccentric.
Her letters are all have a black border to start with, which gradually gets bigger and bigger.
Little laughter, although it's fair to say that there was laughter some 15, 20 years after Prince Albert had died.
She has a cast made of his hand, which she sleeps with, which is a little spooky, I think.
It's a good thing it was only his hand.
At Windsor, the Queen had begun her marathon period of mourning by photographing every part of the room in which her husband had died to ensure that nothing in it would ever change. A jug of hot water was placed each morning on Albert's washstand, and fresh flowers strewn on his pillows. His dressing gown and fresh clothes were laid each evening on his bed. Ladies-in-waiting began to tap their temples as the Queen went past. Could the head of the world's largest empire really be losing her mind?
There are a number of behaviours related to mourning that clearly are not healthy. Hanging on to mementos, particularly rather unnecessary mementos, a cast of Albert's hand, or hanging on to all his clothes, all his underpants, that's worrying. And bereavement counselling encourages people to get rid of all this stuff. Certainly Victoria and her withdrawal, her bereavement, was unusual. No doubt about it. It was a prolonged bereavement reaction which many people would see may well have gone into a form of depressive illness.
Just as stress was a new disease for the 20th century, the Victorians invented depression. But Victorian doctors' understanding of the condition was rudimentary. The Queen's medicine chest, which remains at Osborne House, is evidence that her doctors tried to pull Victoria back from the brink of breakdown with a powerful cocktail of drugs. Morphine and laudanum act on the brain in the same way as heroin, and certainly would have made the Queen feel happy, for a short while at least. But they were in no way an effective long-term treatment of depression. By the end of 1862, Victoria seemed to be living in self-imposed exile on the Isle of Wight at Osborne House, the home Albert had built for them both. Reform bills were passed, wars fought, and discoveries made, all in her absence. For many, her actions seemed like an unofficial abdication.
The Queen's health and nerves require an interval of bracing mountain air and comparative quiet, or she will break down completely. And if the public will not take her as she is, she must give all up.
Giving all up was exactly what many people thought she should do. And revolutionaries and reformers were now even finding the courage to demand the abolition of the monarchy altogether.
Cabinet ministers are constantly enjoining her to come back to London because of the strength of Republican feeling, and one mustn't underestimate that. There really was a belief, I think, growing in Britain at the time that the monarchy was becoming irrelevant, encapsulated in comments from the Times, the official organ of the day. And there appears this marvellous poster in 1864 on the gates of Buckingham Palace saying that these premises will be let or sold due to the decline in the late occupants' business.
As Republican rumblings grew even louder, the establishment creaked into action, seeking to boost the monarchy's flagging popularity with pomp and pageantry. The Prime Minister, Disraeli, full of flattery and encouragement, finally brought the Queen back into the outside world to carnival-like rejoicing.
Queen Victoria did come out of that period of mourning, but she was a little bit like Harley Davidson, always black, does better with a kickstart. And she had 3 kickstarts. Being made Empress of India was the first thing. The Golden Jubilee certainly got her towards the fore, and the Diamond Jubilee was something that she took great care in planning.
The magnificent jubilees of 1887 and 1897 marked the point when British monarchs ceased to be decision-takers and policy-makers. During Victoria's absence from government, Parliament became more and more powerful, and when she returned, she found she'd become a mere icon, a figurehead to be brought out for display. The constitutional monarchy as we know it today was born. A monarch's mental state would never again threaten the well-being of Britain.